Okay, so Oregon comes into town at SHI Stadium in Piscataway. Take on Rutgers. Let's get to it. Okay, so the Ducks waddle into town to face Rutgers after a 30-20 loss to Indiana that many people were surprised. By the way, sorry, Penn State. Kurt Signetti re-ups with Indiana. He goes from $8.5 million to $11.6 million per year to stay at Indiana for 8 years, $96 million fully guaranteed contract. Boy, this coaching cycle is going to be fascinating to watch. You have openings at Penn State, Oregon State, Arkansas, Virginia Tech. Some people believe strongly it could even come this weekend. Florida, Billy Napier. Wisconsin, Luke Fickell, having issues up there. Some think Jonathan Smith at Michigan State might have been a mistake. Michigan State fans and alumni kind of wishing him to move on. So there's a lot of movement. I have to say, a little bit surprised with Signetti, but he has long-term guaranteed contract, and he'll be in Indiana, unfortunately for us, I think. Nonetheless, all right, so, just to wrap this up, there was a lot of discussion about, well, why, did Penn State mid-season? It kind of surprised me a little bit, but when you think about all the openings, you want to get a head start of all the openings and potential openings to get going, talking to guys to keep them from going to another school who has openings, will likely have openings, so they got a head start on that. So I can see why they did. Florida State is another one. Mike Norvell, that's another one that's probably going to come available. So let's get to it. Oregon, not surprisingly, a 17.5-point favorite against Rutgers, coming off a 38-19 loss to Washington. At Washington, a team in Washington, one of the good, fun games, interesting games to watch to see how the Big Ten shakes out. Washington and Michigan should be a good game, an interesting game. I happen to think Michigan's somewhat overrated. I believe Washington absolutely has the ability to beat them. Nonetheless, let's get to it. Oregon, Coach touched on this on the pregame press conference. Oregon has superior speed, athleticism. They are dominant in the trenches, particularly in the defensive line. They're absolutely have an edge in the secondary. And I think I saw on the night report when they were talking with an Oregon podcaster who, did I remember this correctly and not misremember that they have 4 starting freshmen in the secondary? We've talked a lot about NIL, revenue sharing, and player movement, and how guys have to get in sooner. This is one of those examples where if you got the athletes, forget about the developmental stuff. You got to get them ready and get them in there. They have the edge at quarterback. There's no shame in that. They actually have a more productive running game. We have the more productive bellwether number 1 running back, but they run it with 3 guys, so they have more yards per carry. Wide receiver is kind of a wash. Big advantage at tight end. And the night report, and talking to the reporter, podcaster from Oregon, he was saying that their offensive line is not as good as it was last year. And their linebackers are kind of a soft spot. Gee, does that sound familiar? I think we're in that same exact boat. But nonetheless, it doesn't even matter. Oregon is well balanced. They're explosive on offense. Number 10 points per game. Number 7 points per play. 17 in yards per play. Number 12 in yards per rush, and number 24 in red zone scoring. They are one of those balanced teams like Indiana, which makes them particularly dangerous. Number 9 in total defense, 11th in points per game, 5th in yards per game, 7th in yards per play. So it's not rocket science, and this isn't news. They're going to pose problems on both sides of the ball. Rutgers, we're 35th in offense. However, in the Big Ten, we've scored 28, 19 points is about 25 points per game against average to maybe slightly above average Big Ten teams. We're 4th in passing yards per game. Passing yards per game. We move the ball in between the 20s, but when it comes to sticking the ball in the end zone, we're 106th in red zone scoring. So, and surprisingly, you think of us as a running team, Kyle Monungai, Antoine Raymond, yada yada yada, but we're only 102nd in yards per rush. So the volume is there, the yards are there, but the yards per play are not. We're 93rd in rushing yards per game, so we're kind of have to be opportunistic. And even though we're 4th passing yards per game, we're 114th in sack percentage at 8.5%. And on defense, we know about our struggles. Not going to rehash this over. We're, depending on who's stat line you're following, we're 90th to low 100s defensively. Terrible against the pass, 123rd. Better against the run, but that's probably because teams have success throwing the ball against us, and we're number 49. But we're also 112th in yard per rush. So we get gashed for about 5 yards per carry on the ground. That and that's a matter of scheme and play calling. You're having success passing. You can balance out the pass game with some delay RPO runs and mobile quarterbacks and the like. So we can't defend anything that Oregon does well, and we don't have to do in-depth analysis to understand that. Turnover margins. It's about even, actually. On offense, defense, about number 77. Giveaways were number 9. We don't turn it over a lot. That's good. That's part of being well coached. But takeaways, and we know that there was a lot of talk during camp. We were going to work on that. We have to get turnovers, yada, yada, yada. Not working so far. We're 126. Offensive penalties, we're ranked top 15, as you might expect, but defensively is meh. It's middling, 66, and we've seen some costly defensive penalties, especially against Iowa. So all this to say, all the statistical breakdown, the advanced analytics, doesn't matter, right? The conventional wisdom has been pretty much all season that if we're going to win, it's going to have to be a shootout. We have to play like a Big 12 team. We've been saying this every week, but like we're in the Big 12, but we haven't really produced in the Big 10. It's one thing to roll it up against Norfolk and Miami of Ohio. It's a whole other thing against Washington. I mean, even Minnesota, Ohio, for crying out loud. I mean, what are we doing? We haven't produced the points in the Big 10. Comes down to finishing drives, timely and costly mistakes, And I don't suspect we're going to be able to put up 30 against Oregon. A lot of people saying, well, you know, 38, 30, 45, 35 kind of, I just don't think it's in the cards. Talked about this the past, past couple games. It seems we have to be perfect and execute at every critical moment and not make that mistake while making the play. And we're not a perfect team. We're a very flawed team. Whether it's finishing drives, untimely penalties, special teams breakdowns, not in position to make a play, in-game management, we're a flawed team. That being said, if we have the kind of game where we're not perfect, and Oregon's doing what they do, they're moving the ball up and down the field. They're getting their plays, they get their explosives, they're scoring, moving the ball consistently. There are opportunities there. They're 104th in the nation on fourth down conversions. A little bit of a surprise. This is even bigger, 132nd in red zone scoring. So if you wanted to find one thing on a micro analysis, if we could have success, and it's something that we've struggled with, getting the ball into the end zone in the red zone is an opportunity to kind of exploit there. And look, is it possible? Yeah, we don't have to be, the 1970s, 80s, the Oklahoma, Nebraska teams when we're, just moving the ball up and down the field the whole game. But just execute some drives, finish some drives, hang around, stay in the game. Oregon is going to get their plays. There's a reason why they're a top 5, 10 program every year. We saw Northwestern hung around early. This turned out to be better than we thought. Penn State, what was it, 3-3 after one? It was 10-3 at the half. Well, no, 3-3 at the half. And then it was 10-3 in the third quarter, and then it became tied in the fourth quarter. And then, we went into overtime and double overtime, and Oregon won. So, but, Oregon's going to make their plays, but if we can make our plays without shooting ourselves in the foot and hang around and move the ball, get our 400 yards plus offense, but stick it in the end zone and make our kicks. I mean, if we can do that, there are opportunities there. There's a chance there, but I think it's a slim chance. I don't see a path forward for us. We have not beaten a ranked team in 16 years. We've lost the last 41 matchups by an average of 29 points per game. It's the longest drought in Power 4. 2009 against South Florida was the last time we had a ranked win. We also beat them in 2007. They were ranked number 2. We made a big deal out of that, but they wound up 7-5, 8-5 after their bowl game, and they weren't top 25 any longer. They might have been top 25, but they were 8-5. So what it comes down to, we absolutely cannot make any mistakes. We can't shoot ourselves in the foot. We don't have to do any, micro analysis of advanced stats. It doesn't matter. It's all about the eyeball test. Oregon is a more gifted, athletic, physical team on both sides of the ball. And, Oregon's traveling coast to coast, but that doesn't really mean anything. Traveling across country, people talk about that all the time. UCLA came in here last year, ran us off the field. Wisconsin came in, ran us off the field. Illinois came in, a crazy weather day. They beat us. We got fortunate against Washington last year, but Washington was a 6-6 team last year. They weren't the team that we think they are. They won their bowl game, so they were 7-6. So this game, I'll be honest, it's not really that important because everybody expected us to lose. If we lose, it is what it is. But the next 3-game stretch will define the season. All right. We're going to be 3-4. We're going to be 0-4 in the Big Ten. But we travel to Purdue, Illinois, and then Maryland at home. That 3-game stretch is the season. You pick up 3 wins there, and Illinois is going to be a struggle, but I think it's a team we can kind of hang with. They're now kind of an underrated team. I'm not sure. I think they're outside the top 25 now. But there's no shame in the games that they lost against Ohio State and Indiana. So in many ways, it doesn't really matter what happens tomorrow. The season starts next week, 3 must games in a row. I'm looking at this game, maybe a 45-17, 45-20 kind of game. If you wanted to have a rosier outlook where Oregon is having, Penn State after losing to Oregon spiraled. I don't think Dan Lanning will allow Oregon to spiral like that, but if they run into a little bit of a rut and they're not on their game and they don't execute perfectly, they play well, but they're just not their usual self, and we make some plays, maybe it is that 41-38 kind of game. I don't really see it. I think this is one that hopefully doesn't get away from us too early and the stadium's half empty at halftime, because that would be really disappointing, especially on homecoming. Nonetheless, everybody, that's it. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. If you're going to SHI, I hope it turns out to be a positive experience. And we'll see you the next time, and go RU.